Go back to your scrapyard. The word struck the ballroom harder than a slammed door. And for one breath, every investor, officer, engineer, and camera operator inside Lancaster Defense Technologies turned toward the man kneeling beside the presentation stage with oil on his hands. Caleb Rohr did not stand up quickly. He did not argue. He did not even look angry. He simply tightened the last silver screw on the open control panel, wiped his fingers on a folded shop rack, and glanced once toward his 8-year-old daughter, Maddie, who stood half hidden behind the curtain, holding a little battleship he had built for her from scrap metal and old copper wire. Audrey Lancaster, the young chief executive officer everyone in Virginia's defense world called brilliant, cold, and untouchable, stood beneath a wall of blue light, with her company logo glowing behind her like a crown. Her white suit was spotless. Her voice was polished. Her patience was gone. "This is a military technology demonstration, Mr. Rohr," she said, each word clipped clean. "Not a junkyard science fair." A few people laughed softly. Victor Sloan, her operations director, laughed louder than anyone. Caleb heard it all. The laughter, the cameras clicking, the low whisper from a man near the front row who said, "That poor kid must be embarrassed." Maddie lowered her eyes. That was the only thing that made Caleb's jaw tighten. Not the insult, not the room, his daughter. He rose slowly, his flannel shirt creased from crawling under the stage. His work boots leaving a faint dusting of rust-cold grit on the polished floor. The ballroom smelled of new carpet, expensive coffee, and electrical heat from the massive simulation screens. Outside, beyond the glass wall, the Norfolk harbor lay gray under a restless afternoon sky. Gulls circling over ships that looked small from this distance but carried real sons, real daughters, real lives. Caleb looked at the main screen where Lancaster's new naval defense system, Aegis Mark 7, pulsed with clean green lines. Then he looked back at Audrey. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "Your system is about to aim at the wrong ship." The laughter thinned. Audrey blinked once, not because she believed him, but because calm men were harder to dismiss than loud ones. Victor stepped forward with a smile that had no warmth in it. "He fixes radios behind a salvage fence," he said. "Do not let him spook the room." Audrey held Caleb's gaze. "You were brought here to replace a burned connector. Nothing more." Caleb nodded as if accepting the size of the box she had placed around him. "Yes, ma'am." "Then finish your work and leave." He looked down at the small brass admission badge Maddie had dropped near his boot. On the back of it in pencil, he wrote 3 short lines. "Salt fog, double echo, friendly fire." Then he placed it on the edge of the console. "Read that before you run the live simulation." Audrey did not pick it up. Victor did. He glanced at the words, smiled, and folded the badge into his fist. "Enough theater." Maddie watched the badge disappear. Caleb saw her watching and his voice softened. "It is all right, sweetheart." But it was not all right. The lights dimmed, the doors closed. The United States Navy delegation entered. And somewhere in the back of the room, an old admiral stopped walking the moment he saw Caleb Rohr's face. The admiral did not call out. Not yet. He stopped just inside the back in trance, one hand resting on the rim of his service cap, his face suddenly still beneath the hard white lights of the ballroom. No one noticed him. Pause. The cameras were pointed at Audrey Lancaster. The investors were watching the glowing screens. Victor Sloan was already leaning toward a Navy procurement officer, whispering something polished and poisonous about liability, procedure, and an unqualified repairman. Caleb Rohr heard none of it clearly. He had learned years ago that a room full of powerful people could sound a lot like wind through a chain-link fence, loud enough to bend things, never strong enough to move what was rooted. That morning, before the glass towers and polished floors, he had been standing ankle-deep in gravel at Rohr Salvage, a 2-acre scrapyard off a county road 6 miles from the harbor, where old trucks rusted under blue tarps and gulls fought over crumbs near the office roof. The air had smelled of salt, motor oil, and rain waiting to happen. Caleb had been rebuilding an alternator at sunrise while Maddie sat on an overturned milk crate beside him, painting the tiny battleship he had welded from a broken hinge, 3 bottle caps, and a strip of copper wire. "Do you think real ships get scared?" she had asked. Caleb had smiled without looking up. "Ships do not get scared, Peanut. People on them do." His hand had slowed around the wrench. Sometimes she had watched him carefully. The way children watch the parts of their parents that hurt but never speak. Caleb had tapped the little metal ship with one clean knuckle. That is why someone has to build things that tell the truth. The scrapyard was not much, but it was honest. A faded American flag lifted and fell beside the office door. A coffee pot burned too hot on a stained counter. A photograph frame sat face down near the register, untouched for years. Customers knew Caleb as the quiet white single father who could make a dead engine breathe again. Who charged less than he should, who fixed a neighbor's heater in January and refused payment because the woman had kids asleep upstairs. They did not know about the sealed files. They did not know about the Blackwater exercise off the Pacific. They did not know that the man who sorted cracked circuit boards by hand had once built signal protections for destroyers and rescue ships. Systems designed for fog, storm, and electronic confusion. Caleb preferred it that way. Quiet had become his fence. Dignity had become his roof. By noon, Victor's men had arrived in a black company sport utility vehicle, not asking for help so much as purchasing obedience. "Lancaster needs a connector replaced," one of them had said. "You will be in and out." Caleb had almost refused until he saw the part number on their tablet. Old Navy architecture. His architecture. So he brought his tools, brought Maddie because school had closed early, and walked straight into a room that saw rust before it saw respect. Now standing beside the stage while Audrey prepared to begin, Caleb looked once at the crumpled badge in Victor's hand and understood something. Cold and simple. The system was not merely broken. Someone wanted it to fail. Caleb did not move toward Victor. He did not accuse him. A man who has lived long enough with regret learns that truth is strongest when it arrives with proof. So, he stayed near the console. Hands folded around the handle of his tool bag. While Audrey Lancaster stepped into the center of the stage, and the room adjusted itself around her. The lights narrowed, the murmurs lowered. On the 40-foot screen behind her, the Lancaster Defense Technologies emblem dissolved into a clean digital map of the Atlantic coastline. Blue water, white grid lines, green naval icons moving in perfect formation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Audrey began, her voice steady enough to hide every storm inside her. Aegis Mark 7 was built for one promise: clarity. When the world becomes chaos, the audience leaned in. Navy officers watched without blinking. Investors held their pens ready. Reporters lifted their phones. To them, Audrey looked untouchable. Caleb could see that she was not. He saw the small tension at the base of her jaw, the careful breath before each sentence. The way her fingers touched the presentation remote as if it were the last solid thing in a rising flood. This contract was not only business to her. It was inheritance. It was judgment. It was the ghost of her father, Warren Lancaster, whose portrait hung in the main lobby downstairs, silver-haired and stern, the kind of man people still quoted 10 years after his funeral. Audrey had spent her whole adult life, proving she was not just his daughter wearing his name on a building. She had doubled revenue. She had cleaned up old departments. She had turned a sleepy defense supplier into a company Washington listened to. But some rooms still saw a woman before they saw a leader. And Audrey had learned to survive by never letting them see softness. That was why Caleb unsettled her, not because he challenged her. Powerful men did that every week. Caleb unsettled her because he had warned her without wanting anything. No demand, no drama, no performance, just 3 plain words on a badge and a look in his eyes that carried the weight of weathered harbors and older grief. Victor stepped beside the stage and folded his hands neatly. "The live simulation will show target separation under coastal interference," he announced smoothly. "Commercial traffic, rescue assets, Allied vessels, all filtered in real time. Audrey nodded, but Caleb saw the quick glance Victor gave the lead technician at the side station. Too quick, too familiar. The technician looked down. The map shifted. A simulated storm rolled across the screen. Gray bands sweeping over the digital water. Salt fog conditions. Caleb felt the old mathematics wake in his mind, not like pride, but like duty. Waves scatter, double echo, false classification. He looked toward Maddie. She was still behind the curtain, clutching her little scrap metal ship with both hands, her eyes wide and wet, but brave. Caleb gave her the smallest nod. She nodded back. In that quiet exchange, he remembered what he had told her that morning. Someone has to build things that tell the truth. Then the first warning icon blinked yellow on the screen so briefly most of the room missed it. Victor did not, Caleb did not. And at the back of the ballroom, the old Admiral took one slow step forward. The yellow warning vanished before Audrey could turn her head, swallowed by a clean green display that made the system look perfect again. Victor smiled as if nothing had happened. Caleb saw the lie disappear, and so did the Admiral, though neither man spoke. Audrey continued, in contested waters, hesitation costs lives. Aegis Mark 7 gives commanders the confidence to know what they are seeing before they make the call. A soft wave of approval moved through the room. Pins scratched, cameras hummed. The simulation advanced to Phase 2, and the digital coastline filled with civilian vessels, Coast Guard markers, a hospital ship, and 2 Navy destroyers running parallel through a band of simulated fog. Caleb took one step closer to the side console. Victor noticed immediately. "Mr. Roar," he said too loudly. "The repair area is behind the marked line." Audrey paused. Every face shifted back toward Caleb, and the old laughter found its way to the surface again, quieter this time, but sharper. Caleb looked at the screen, then at the technicians, then at Audrey. "That warning did not clear," he said. "It was hidden." Victor gave a short laugh. "Hidden by whom? The system or your imagination?" A few investors smiled. One reporter lifted her phone higher. Audrey's expression hardened. Not because she was cruel by nature, but because fear often wears the face of pride. "You have already disrupted this event once," she said. "Do not do it again." Caleb's voice remained low. "I'm not trying to embarrass you." Then stop speaking. The words came fast. Too fast. Maddie flinched behind the curtain and the little ship slipped in her hands, its copper antenna bending against her palm. Caleb heard the tiny metal click. He turned and for a moment the ballroom faded away. Not the officers, not the investors, not Audrey. Only his daughter, standing small beneath a curtain of velvet, trying not to cry because grown people with expensive shoes had decided her father was something to laugh at. Victor stepped down from the stage and spread his hands. "This is exactly why we ask that he stay invisible." He sees one connector and decides he is a naval engineer. Then he looked toward Maddie, pretending not to. Some men bring their children to work because sympathy is cheaper than credentials. The room went still in a different way. Even Audrey looked at Victor, faintly surprised by how low he had gone. Caleb did not raise his voice. He crossed to Maddie, knelt in front of her, and gently straightened the bent copper wire on the little ship. "Look at me, sweetheart," he said. Her chin trembled. "They think you are nothing." Caleb wiped one tear from her cheek with his thumb. "We do not let cruel people teach us who we are." She swallowed hard, but you could tell them. His eyes softened and something old moved behind them. Something disciplined, painful, and kind. Not like this. Behind them, the simulation entered Phase 3. The gray fog on the screen thickened. The hospital ship marker flickered once, then twice. At the back of the room, Admiral Nathaniel Briggs stopped beside the center aisle, his face losing color as the same pattern he had seen 7 years ago began to form again. The hospital ship marker steadied for half a second, then shifted from soft green to pale amber. It was the kind of change a trained operator might dismiss as a display delay, the kind of tiny error that hides inside confidence until confidence becomes danger. Caleb rose from Maddie's side and turned back toward the screen. His face had changed, not hardened, not angry, just focused, as if a door inside him had opened and a colder, older room had been waiting behind it. "Audrey," he said. It was the first time he used her first name, and the sound of it cut through the ballroom more sharply than a shout. She looked at him, startled. Victor moved first. "Do not address the chief executive officer like you know her." Caleb ignored him. "You need to pause the simulation." Audrey's hand tightened around the remote. "On what basis?" "Salt fog is bending your return signal. The destroyer's wake is creating a double echo off the hospital ship's hull. Your system is reading the reflection as hostile maneuvering." A technician at the side station lifted his eyes. He understood enough to be afraid. Victor snapped his fingers at him. "Eyes on your panel." Caleb pointed toward the lower left corner of the screen. There the classification weight just jumped from 12% to 41%. Audrey glanced. For the first time, doubt reached her face before pride could cover it. That is within tolerance. Not with a rescue asset inside the same corridor. You do not know our tolerances. Caleb's voice stayed calm. I wrote the original interference model your engineers are standing on. The ballroom went quiet. Not silent. Not yet, but quiet enough for the hum of the projectors to become strangely loud. Victor laughed once, too quickly. That is absurd. Caleb looked at him then, only at him. You knew the connector was not the problem. Victor's smile thinned. Careful. You knew the patch would fail under fog density above 80%. Careful, Victor repeated. Lower this time. Audrey stepped between their lines of sight. Mister, are you accusing my director of sabotage in front of Navy Command? Caleb looked at the crumpled badge still trapped in Victor's fist. I am saying your system is being guided toward failure. And the only person in this room who touched the suppression logs before launch was him. Victor lifted both hands in offended innocence. This is what desperation sounds like. A junk dealer gets caught interfering with classified equipment and suddenly everyone else is guilty. He turned toward the security team. Remove him before he damages the demonstration further. 2 guards approached, respectful but firm. Maddie stepped out from behind the curtain, small shoes tapping against the polished floor. Wait, she said. Her voice trembled, but it carried. Everyone looked at her. She held up the little scrap metal ship in one hand, and in the other, the torn corner of her badge that Victor had failed to keep hidden when he crushed it. 3 pencil lines were still visible. Salt fog. Double echo. Friendly fire. Audrey stared at the words. The screen behind her flashed red. Red light washed over Audrey's face, turning the perfect stage into something that no longer looked like a presentation. It looked like a warning. The green naval icon scattered across the digital Atlantic began to pulse in uneven rhythm. And the hospital ship marker, the one carrying a simulated medical crew and evacuees, was now outlined in hostile red. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. The ballroom that had been full of polished confidence became a room of held breath and small human sounds. A chair leg scraping, a pen falling, the soft electronic beep of a system deciding something terribly wrong with absolute certainty. That cannot be right, Audrey whispered. Victor turned sharply toward the technicians. Reset the display. No one moved. I said, reset it. The youngest technician swallowed. Sir, it is not the display. Caleb stood between the 2 security guards, still calm, still not resisting. His eyes locked on the screen as the simulation advanced by itself. The classifier is cascading, he said. It is feeding its own mistake back into the threat model. Audrey looked at him. What does that mean? It means the more the hospital ship tries to identify itself, the more your system believes it is lying. A Navy captain in the front row rose slowly from his seat. His face had gone pale beneath the brim of his dress cap. If this were live, he said, each word heavy enough to sink the room, we would be authorizing a response against a friendly rescue vessel. The silence after that was not embarrassment. It was fear, not loud fear, not panic. The deeper kind. The kind that makes expensive suits feel thin and titles feel useless. Audrey turned toward Victor. You told me this had been stress-tested. It was, Victor said quickly. This is outside the demonstration parameters. Caleb shook his head once. No, this is exactly the condition I warned you about. Victor pointed at him. Because you created it. His voice climbed now, polished charm cracking at the edges. He touched the panel. He wrote on a badge. He has been muttering about Navy systems since he walked in. This is interference, Audrey. This is sabotage. The two guards tightened their grip on Caleb's arms. Not roughly, but enough for Maddie to see. Her little face changed. The tears were gone now. In their place was something fiercer, something born when a child has watched a good man stay quiet too long. My dad tried to save your ships, she cried. Her voice broke, but it did not disappear. You laughed at him. Audrey looked at Maddie, then at the torn badge corner in the child's hand, then at the screen where the red lock indicator began counting down from 90. 90 seconds until the simulated engagement chain completed. 90 seconds until the room would see proof that Lancaster's billion-dollar miracle could mistake mercy for danger. Caleb spoke softly. You need to release manual classification control. The lead technician shook his head. We cannot. The executive lockout is active. Audrey looked at Victor. Victor did not look back. That was when Admiral Nathaniel Briggs stepped fully into the aisle, his voice low, old, and unmistakably commanding. Then someone in this room had better start telling the truth. Every head turned toward the aisle. Admiral Nathaniel Briggs stood beneath the recessed lights in his dark dress uniform, his service ribbons, catching a thin line of blue from the failing screen. He did not raise his voice because men who have carried real authority rarely need volume to prove it. The Navy officers stood almost at once. Audrey followed half a second later, not because protocol told her to, but because the air around the Admiral seemed to change the room. Victor's face tightened. Admiral Briggs, he said, forcing a smile that looked painful. We were not told you had RE.